Hey everybody, Happy New Year. I had some Patreon questions come in, and this comes from Fabiano in Brazil. And he had a whole bunch of questions, and I just figured instead of trying to type them all out, I'll just make a quick video and try to answer them on the fly. So number one, he asked, how to get the most out of my classes. If you were a student, how would you set up your study from the materials here at Patreon? So that's a good question. I would say it would be best if you could actually get some clay and try to do what I'm doing, in your own home or studio while you watch the videos. And if that's too much, at least do some sketching, do some note taking from the videos. If I say something that just maybe catches your ear and, oh, that's a good point, never thought of that, jot it down. Don't just write it down, also draw a little cartoon, a picture, so you don't forget what I was doing at the time, okay? So I would at least be hands-on in clay or with your note taking, or just listen. You can just have them on in the background and until I say something interesting, then run over and check it out. Number two, what is the optimal study and practice routine for the student? How many hours per day, week? Could you please suggest a curriculum for self-taught? Where to start? Optimal study for a student is, I would say, 6 hours a day. 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, and maybe some sketching at nighttime. Now, you can't always do that. So maybe if you have a day job, you're just gonna be studying at nighttime. That's fine. You can learn under electric light. You can do a self-portrait. You can do still life. You can sculpt your friend if you can't hire a model. Get a fellow artist and trade time posing for each other, okay? So optimal, at least 6 hours a day. That's kind of what I do in the morning. I come in, I try to work right away, 8 o'clock when the light's good. Take a break for lunch and then come back and work again. I prefer to work under natural light, but we all work at night too. Number three, what are the biggest mistakes made by sculpture students? Boy, there's so many that I've made, and I'm still making them and still learning. With the figure, if you want to talk about actual sculpting, people tend to make hands and feet too small. That's one. People tend to make the face too big in relation to the back of the head. They make the femurs too long. That's another one. They tend to make the torsos too long too. So those are just proportional things. Other mistakes. I think sometimes sculptors are too cheap. They're afraid to hire models. They might not be willing to take risks and invest in having molds made and casting. That's something that takes a little bit of risk, and you got to be a little crazy to make steps in this career. And a lot of people just don't stick with it. Let's face it, it's a very arduous, long, demanding career, and you don't get great right away. You have to build incrementally. So I think a lot of people give up, or they just go to something easier. So it's not for everybody. Okay, number four, how should the student deal with frustration and resistance? Try to think about that. Frustration and resistance. So when I get frustrated, it's usually when my sculpture's not going the way I want it to. And in that case, that's where I go to my bookcase, and I go back and I look at the great artists of the past, and within 5 or 10 minutes, I find out, wow, they were dealing with the same things I was dealing with. So then I don't feel so alone anymore. So that gives me a little bit of hope that they went through it too, and we're also going through it. Resistance, as there's always going to be resistance. So as I said in the last question, it's not for everybody. If you can't take the the criticism and the failure, then it's not for you. So you have to be a little bit tough. Everett Raymond Kinsler, famous portrait artist, said you had to have the hide of a rhino. You had to have rhinoceros skin to be a portrait artist. Okay, number 5, how to read and learn from sculpture and art books. Do you read the entire book or just learn from the reference images? Mostly, I look at the pictures, and I know that's typical artist response. I think some books, the text is great, and they have insights that are helpful, and other books just talk about the artist's sexuality or some sort of theory that the art historians come up with that they're trying to prove. So sometimes the text is not really helpful. So mainly when I look at an art book, I look at the images and I think, are these good images, or is this not worth my money? So I think the images and the captions are probably the most helpful. Unless it's a how-to art book like the Vanderpool book or Richet, those books, the text is going to mean something. So in those type of books, that how to draw, how to sculpt books, read the text. Okay, number 6, how do you plan a job? How is the process prior to sculpting, searching for photos, drawings, armature, etc.? How do you plan a job? So there's an incredible amount of research before you start a job. Whether you're doing a portrait or a figure, you're going to be either hiring a model, and for me as a portrait artist, a lot of times I'm letting the model guide me. That's just kind of my upbringing. I don't try to force the model into a pose that's not them. And even with a figurative piece, I hope that the model is my guide. In a portrait, if the person's living, you're going to take a lot of pictures of them. You're going to invite them to your studio if possible, get as many sittings from life with them, and probably do a small sketch first and show the client that sketch. It can be a drawing, it can be a small little maquette, as they call it, modello, sometimes they call it. And you definitely want to do a small sculpture before you do the big sculpture. See the big sculpture behind me? I did a very small sculpture first. See, here's the little one. The arm is not attached right now, but so this sculpture was very important for me to do that one. And your sketch can be very crude. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's part of the process. So you have to trust the process that you're starting with a sketch. And this pose behind me, I started with this. See that little sketch? That was my first. I don't know if it looks like her, but that's how that started. Probably just on the edge of my sketchbook. Sometimes the idea comes in the middle of the night and you have to just jot it down. Okay, number 7. How are the live model sessions? What is the work routine and breaks? I would say I like at least a 3-hour session with a model, maybe 4 to 6 with a break for lunch. And then usually a model can pose for 20 minutes at a time. Sometimes they pose 25, 30 minutes. Depends on the pose. And then give them, 5 to 10 minute breaks in between. Definitely keep your models fresh. If you see they're suffering, then call a break. Even if it's not been 20 minutes, take a break and talk to your models too. A lot of people don't talk. Okay, let's see. Number 8, what films about artists and sculpture do you suggest? There are some good documentaries. There's a good one on Augustus St. Gaudens. He's an American sculptor. There's some good ones on Bernini. There's one, I forget the name now. I think it's the Power of Art series, Bernini. It does show a lot of sculpture, but it's not really about how to sculpt. And I'm sure there's others, but those are two that come to mind, St. Gaudens and Bernini. Number 9, structure and modeling of the skull. Well, the skull is definitely important. I would get a skull and draw it in all different angles. When you're dealing with the face, the skull is on the surface all over the place. The forehead, the top of the head, the cheekbones, the nasal bone, the teeth, your chin, the skull. There's some fatty forms in the face, but not nearly as much as the rest of the body. So I would say the skull is very important. So yeah, invest in a good skull. A good skull will probably cost, $50 to $100. A plastic Halloween skull is not acceptable. And when you Google around, you'll start to see the difference. Number 10, modeling lesson of features, nose, ear, eye, mouth, and planes. Okay, so I do have some videos on the nose, ear, eye, and mouth. You just have to scroll all the way down to last winter, I think. Okay, so that was 10 good questions, I thought, from Fabiano. And thanks for watching from Brazil and wherever you are. And I'll be making some more videos later this week on the figure anatomy. Okay, thanks for your support.